Conservation invites you to this webinar. I'm just having a few of those pictures where we had different events happening in Barnwell, Wisconsin. We also meet on urban ag farms in Milwaukee. There's one of the events in Clinton, Wisconsin, and the latest event in New Amherst last Friday. We can see that always women are happy to engage with each other and talk more and learn more in our events together. Coming up through Milwaukee Urban Ag, we have an all seasons growing webinar that's coming up on September 22nd online, followed by an in-person event on October 8th. You're all welcome. And then there's another WeWork event coming up at the Humble Pie Farm in Pepin, Learning Circle and Brunch on September 26th. If you are around that area, please join us at that event. And there's one of our WeWork coordinator who's there today, Alana Kachalak. She's got a prairie walk and talk on her farm on September 30th in Jackson County. Please join her and us all in this event as well. And we would welcome everyone to join the listserv. Of late, there's been a lot of chatter going on in our listserv, a lot of good things happening, and a lot of sharing on conservation. And we would invite you to be a part of our WeWork listserv. This program, the Wisconsin Women Conservation, is brought to you all by Merkel Fields Agricultural Institute. Our partners, Renewing the Countryside, have been with us for the last 5 years as we are running this program. And we all know that the funding has been terminated for the WeWork program. And so we thank the Women's Fund of Greater Milwaukee, the Natural Resources Foundation, the Women Food and Ag Network, who have been supporting us in part for all our programs. And we want to say that you are the best. We've built a great community together through WeWork, and we thank you for that. One of the things we would ask today is we are announcing a 10,000 match challenge. Climate Sisters for the Future, we want you all to be a part of this challenge. So please look at the, if you can go onto the QR code and provide us a little, it'll be great to bring this $10,000 to the table. We want you to rally with us for this. And so I ask you to support us through this challenge that we bring to you. And thank you for joining us today. So we'll get back and we will try and share the stage with our speakers for today quickly so they'll be able to talk more. Here I am. I am going to introduce Katie Adams from Savannah Institute to talk to you more about agroforestry. Katie leads the demonstration and on-farm education team, whose work includes demonstration farm program, apprentice program, on-farm education, emergent partner farm network, and building communities of practice around agroforestry. Based in flatlands of central Illinois, her work focuses on creative ways to connect people, build abundance, and create new futures on landscapes and in communities through perennial cropping systems. Katie's background in anthropology helps illuminate the deep ecological and social connections created through agriculture and informs her work on the ground. Katie is drawn to agroforestry for its powerful reimagining of a future that is abundant, perennial, and beautiful. Katie also teaches community classes on seasonal cooking, fermentation, and canning when not rambling around with her veggie farming husband in rambunctious style. Thank you, Katie, for being here. Take it away. And before Katie starts, we have a poll, and I would just call out the results of the poll. The top barrier in adding perennials looks like this: maintenance and markets is the barrier that people feel, and what would help you expand perennials on your farm. Technical assistance and cost share funding is going head to head, and then followed by grants and online resources. So thank you for that, and share results. Maybe people need to see the results, even though I called it out. And take it away, Katie.
Thank you so much for the invitation to share about agroforestry and our work at Savannah Institute today. I'm really excited to be here and also learn from folks in the room because so many of us work with perennials. And so while I'm here talking, I know that I'm part of giant networks of people with really deep knowledges um, and histories of growing crops with trees and shrubs and perennial crops for millennia. So thank you for being in community here today and inviting me to talk about the work that I do. And so today I'm going to really focus on agroforestry and how does it work. We only have about 20 minutes to talk, so this is going to be pretty abbreviated, but I have links to everything I'm going to talk about and all the resources in this presentation. So don't feel like you have to take furious notes about anything. So I'm part of a large community of people here at Savannah Institute that are helping lay the groundwork for widespread agroforestry. And so much of our work is focused on research, education, outreach, technical assistance, and demonstration of what this looks like. So I am part of a large staff of folks both in Wisconsin and across the Midwest that are really looking at how trees can be integrated on farms. And so not only do we really focus on research, education, and outreach, but we also have some work that focuses on commercialization and market building as well, which is one thing that folks mentioned within the poll that just launched. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I have many other colleagues that are more focused on that. So before I talk more about the tools and resources that are available to folks to help them get started with trees on farms, I'm just going to very quickly define how we talk about agroforestry here at the Savannah Institute. So agroforestry is a host of practices that utilizes trees and shrubs on farms for both conservation and profit in ways that improve the life on the land for humans, animals, water, and the soil itself. And so there's lots of different ways to incorporate that, and there's lots of different options that come from it. Agroforestry is a practice that's been around since the beginning of agriculture. It's practiced in almost every place around the world that has trees as part of their landscapes. And it is the main way that folks farm in lots of different places. Here in the US, we have a deep history of indigenous agroforestry, as well as the United States. Although much of that knowledge has been lost, there are still many people here still doing that work that have deep histories of how trees have been cultivated and utilized by people. At the Savannah Institute, we mostly focus on 5 USDA practices, and I'm going to just quickly go through those with a few examples. The first is alley cropping, which is growing crops between rows of trees and shrubs. So that can look like large-scale alley cropping where we're looking at grains. Here we have wheat alongside trees that are for timber. It can also include annual grains. So here we have soybeans that are also in this larger scale system, but it could also include things like hazelnuts and vegetables. So here we have hazelnuts and carrots being grown. And this is at a little bit of a smaller scale where the equipment is smaller, and you could potentially do this with hand equipment as well. This is a good example of a tree and hay-based system, both that can be used with machinery, as well as something that's more small scale and human scale, where we're doing lots of small baling in between those rows of trees. The next is silvopasture, which is the integration of trees, pasture, and livestock in a single system. And it's intentional and intensive. It's not just turning animals out into the woods. And so we have 2 different types: silvopasture by addition, we're putting trees into pasture, and then silvopasture by subtraction, where we utilize existing forest resources. So here's an example of cattle being grazed within a black currant system. So this is silvopasture by addition, where cattle are brought in after the harvest. So we're not having issues with food safety. This is silvopasture by subtraction, where this is a pine plantation that has been thinned over time, and then animals have been introduced into that system. The third is windbreaks, simply just rows of trees and shrubs around fields. Here's a windbreak that's about 10 years old, that mostly has hybrid poplar that's integrated into a system that is mostly hazelnuts and other shrub fruits. Here's one against a conventional corn and soybean field that's really meant to protect those commodity crops. And the last one, or the second to last one on our list is forest farming, which is the cultivation of specialty crops under forest canopies. So that might be things like growing shiitake mushrooms or medicinals, such as ginseng. Here, this is simulated ginseng, which is being intentionally planted under a forest canopy. But you could also grow things like cohosh and other things that might do well in different environments. And then the last example of forest farming here is a food forest installation. And this is more of a community-based context where we can utilize trees as creating beautiful, abundant canopies where other crops and different foods can be grown underneath them for community benefit. And the last one here, riparian buffers, where we can use trees and shrubs to really protect water, which is our most vital resource here on the land. So here's a edible riparian buffer that's mostly utilizing elderberry before as a crop that's planted next to and within a riparian area. So all that being said, agroforestry is one system with many options that you can choose depending on your goals, your land, if you have trees or livestock, or your land is arable or not. There's lots of different options to utilize these practices. But that's a lot of a lot to throw at folks, and it can be overwhelming at times to think how to add trees and integrate systems like agroforestry onto productive farmlands. And so I'm going to break it down into something pretty simple and just 3 questions that we can ask to get ourselves started with agroforestry. The first is, what are your goals? The second, what can you grow? My cat is here saying hello as well. What can you grow on your site? And then the third is what funding is available. Obviously, there's more questions you want to ask yourself, but these are 3 simple ones that you can start with to start building an agroforestry plan. So, how do you decide what your goals are? Here at Savannah Institute, we have a great resource that can help you get started with this. This is for free on our website, and it's a PDF that helps you ask what questions you might want to think through as you're thinking about agroforestry. This resource is really broken down to be able to work either with one person or to work together with your family, other farm partners, to ask big questions about the goals of your farm, what you need to and want to accomplish, what sort of labor resources that you have. What do you need to happen both now and to the future? Some questions about succession and cash flow, all of kind of the big questions that you want to sit down and think through as you're thinking about adding trees to your farm, because it's a long-term endeavor. Often trees will outlive us, and so we have to think deeply about what we want them to do. If written resources aren't your jam, we also have an audio resource that can help you with some of these same questions. We have a guided meditation with my coworker, Barbara, that's really meant to place you within your farm and really imagine what could be different as you add perennials to those spaces. This is also an interesting one to just sit down and be quiet and imagine and bring it yourself into your body as well as your heart and your mind about what might happen on the farm with these trees. So the second question is, what can grow on your site? Once you have some goals identified of what you want trees to do, now it's time to look at the land itself to see what's possible, what can help you achieve those goals. And so there's lots of different resources out here that are helpful, not just for agroforestry, but production in general. One of them that we often have people start with is SoilWeb or SoilWeb Survey that can bring up a ton of information about your land. One note about this tool is that it gives you very high level information about what they think might be happening based on the conditions and the landscape of your land. You will need to ground truth anything that comes out here based on observation, soil tests, and just like general interactions with the land. For agroforestry, there's some very particular things that we need to pay attention to because of root systems of trees and what they do at in the soil at different soil horizons. So flood frequency, ponding, which is when water is staying and sitting in one place, your drainage class or how water is moving through the soil, your minimum water table depth, or how high is your water table coming up, and then minimum bedrock depth. So if you have if bedrock is pretty, you don't have very much soil before you hit bedrock, there's certain trees or shrubs that just won't do well, and maybe trees wouldn't do well at all. So these are the main ones to keep in mind. In addition to the ones that I just talked about, they can also help you with soil type, farmland class, that can help sort of give you the bigger picture of where your soil and your land is within the surrounding landscape as well. The next one that you need to pay attention to when learning about your land and working with perennials, or I would say any plants, is the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map. This can tell you where certain species can survive and thrive, or not do well at all. Now, the USDA Plant Hardiness Zones just changed not too long ago, within the past 2 years. And so you can expect them to change again. But mostly things are, you're gonna go like change from like a 5 to a 6, or an A to a B over the next 15 or 20 years or so. So if you're thinking about planting trees that are going to live for hundreds of years, you might thinking about how those plant hardiness zones are going to change. And I have the link here so you can check to see where you are within that. Some tools that we have at Savannah Institute that can also help with this is what we call our agroforestry tree selection tool, which is a very simple spreadsheet-based tool where you can put in your zone, your soil drainage, your average pH, all things you can find online through Soil Web Survey or the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map, and then put it into this, and it can spit out different plants that we work with within integrated tree systems. Some of them are native, and some of them are cultivated trees that we often work with in perennial production-based systems. And you'll all get a copy of the spreadsheet or this slideshow that has a link directly to this, where you can copy and paste this and make your own version of this that you can run your land through. There's also lots of really amazing books and resources that can help you learn more about what trees and shrubs would work well, not only on your landscape, but also within your goal set. And so some ones that I can recommend that I use quite often are these key perennial crop info sheets that are put out by SI, as well as our planting tree crops books, which have really great profiles in the back of the book. These are both free on our website. And then here's just a few books that we recommend that have been really helpful in thinking through how agroforestry and different trees can be integrated here in the Midwest. If you're in a more northern climate, if you're at the northern part of Wisconsin, cold hardy fruits and nuts can be a great guide just to think through what might be possible in those areas. And if you're working with grazing, the Grazer's Guide to Trees is awesome. And if you're interested in forest farming system, Farming the Woods is kind of the book that folks often use when getting started with those systems. Here in Wisconsin, you're also really lucky to have the University of Wisconsin Emerging Crops Accelerator and an extension person working specifically on these crops. Do not sleep on these resources. And Stefan, who's leading this program, is a really phenomenal resource about what's happening in Wisconsin and what sort of research and work on the ground and production is happening with crops that you might not be used to seeing as much. And many of those are perennial, including things like honeyberries and hazelnuts. And then there's also some really great resources that come out of horticultural programs at different universities. University of Kentucky, while much warmer and at a totally different growing zone than Wisconsin, they do have some really great crop resource guides. Michigan State also has wonderful crop production guides for perennial trees and crops that would do well here in Wisconsin, even if the climate and soils are slightly different. If you're working with NRCS Wisconsin, they have a great native tree and shrub guide that you can find linked here in this resource in the slideshow that gives you lots of information about what grows well in different areas for native species. And then we also worked with Wisconsin NRCS to create an agroforestry specific species list that make sure that if you're working with NRCS, you're working with approved trees and you have the info that you need to be able to have a good contract with that partner. Okay, so here we are at kind of the last question, which is what funding is available? This is a big one that folks ask and often need to be able to work with perennial crops. Working with perennials is a big investment because you often plant and then have to wait a long time to get the production off that crop. For something like black currants or other shrub fruit species, you might be 3 years, but for something like chestnuts or hazelnuts, you might be looking at 7 to 10 to 12 years, depending on your growing conditions. And so we need that cost share and help to get those systems started. This used to be a very different presentation because we had lots of options. With the current funding situation, our list of options, especially from the federal government and states, has decreased over time. But I'm still going to give you the big picture so you know what's possible so you can advocate for programs and then also ask for what you need within these organizations. So within the USDA, we have 2 funding mechanisms for agroforestry. One is through NRCS, through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program, and then through FSA or the Farm Service Agency, there's a program called Conservation Reserve Program that's eligible for conventional systems. And then we also have what used to be the Partners for Climate Smart Commodities program, but now is the anticipated market program or AMP that we're negotiating. We might get that program back, we might not. And so just some quick sort of overviews of these. Some offer flat rate reimbursements where you just get a flat rate back. Some you get annual payments for, like CSP and CRP from NRCS. And then some include establishment payments as well as payouts over time. So NRCS often will cross-fund 50 to 70% of plant material, and then this Nature Conservancy program that we hope the funding comes back from has a per tree rate, and we can keep everyone updated on whether or not we're going to get that funded again. And so there are other programs that can pay for agroforestry, establishment and tree planting, such as the Catalyzing Agroforestry program. And here in Wisconsin, there's some specialized programs. If you're in Dane County, there is a tree planting program that you can utilize, and then some programming through Wisconsin Land and Water as well. Another program on hold is a PACE program where we're looking at how to utilize assessed clean energy credits for agroforestry, but funding for that is paused. But I just wanted to keep this on the radar for folks that if it comes back, we'll want to get the word out to utilize it. And so if you need help having track of all these programs, there is a service called Good Agriculture that can send sort of customized emails to you about what funding might be available. It is a paid service, so it might not be worth it, but we're signed up for this and we're interested to see how this continues to help kind of cut down on the trying to figure out where funding's coming from and what's available. And so very quickly, I know I'm at my time. The Savannah Institute has lots of resources for free on our website that can help with crops and selecting crops, getting your agroforestry system started, including leases. We have a great podcast if that's how you learn, and lots of events where you can learn what's happening on the farm. We offer technical assistance for free in the state of Wisconsin. It's our only state where we have this right now because of our funding issues. And so you can sign up on our website to work one-on-one with our technical service provider, and everyone is eligible for a free 1-hour consultation for what might work well on your land. We also invite you, if you're doing agroforestry, to join our demonstration farm network or just come out to an event that we're hosting on the farms. And we're not the only folks doing work on agroforestry. And so we have lots of awesome partners working across the Midwest and the US to get folks the information that they need, including our friends at Canopy Farm Management who work in Illinois and Wisconsin, and also have this great free software where you can put in your address and then get information on if your land is suitable for different crops that we work with. This used to be a paid service, but is now free. And you can find that at canopycompass.com. And so with that, I will end my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie, for this wonderful presentation. You brought across a lot of resources that people can use in order to learn how to do agroforestry in the land. And I'm sure Katie will be happy to help even after this webinar. We'll throw her email in the chat, and you can always reach her and to learn more about the resources and what kind of support you'll have if you want to do agroforestry. Thank you once again. Katie will hang on at the end, and she will be able to answer any of your questions that you might have. We'll reserve all the questions towards end. And now we'll move on to the perennialization part of the webinar. Dr. Nicole Touches, she's going to be the resource person sharing about perennialization. And I read a brief bio before to introduce her. Dr. Nicole Touches is the research director of the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. Dr. Touches completed her bachelor's degree in agronomy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and earned her PhD at Washington State University, completing a project on soil fertility, weed, and soil microbial management in semi-arid organic wheat production systems. She went on to work on cancer research at the University of Minnesota and worked at the University of California, Davis on soil microbial ecology and soil health outreach in processing tomato systems. At Michael Fields, her research focuses on soil fertility and nutrient cycling in food-grade grain systems, where she works mostly with rye, wheat, kernza, oats, and buckwheat. Take it away, Nicole.
Oops, sorry, I didn't know you were going to read that whole thing, or I wouldn't have shared that one. Thank you, Dr. Esther. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I think that, so I'm kind of, Katie was the woody perennial kind of perennial system expert, and I would be more what we would call an herbaceous perennial expert, which would be things like grasses and forbs. I'm not so much a prairie expert, but now I have accrued a little bit of experience. So what I want to do with this presentation today is talk about perennials in I guess this is a little bit, and our Michael Fields Ag Institute farm, located just west of East Troy, is becoming its own little case study for how to incorporate perennials into cropland. So I want to just walk around our farm with you and talk about what we have and what our approach is and how we kind of think about using what's already there and about what's stewarding what is already there and trying to map onto that some production ambitions. So this is the entry. This is a little footpath that one of our tenant farmers created through an existing prairie strip. I actually took these photos this morning, so I apologize for the poor morning light that imbues some of these photos, but even though it makes for not ideal pictures, it's also kind of beautiful. So this is a footpath. You could see we have a prairie strip right here. We have prairie strips that outline our whole farm, which consists of about 156 cultivable acres, and then there's an additional about 50 acres of wooded kettle moraine. So we're located right off the southern edge of the kettle moraine forest, the southern unit of the kettle moraine forest, which ends in about Palmyra, Eagle, East Troy area. There might be some fingers that extend downward, but we're pretty close to the southern part of the state, what's designated a state forest, which is beautiful. So we have these kettles. Kettles were formed when the Great Glacier during the last ice age was kind of starting to melt. And as it was starting to melt, you can imagine giant boulders were sort of dropping off of the bottom of the glacier. So you can picture if your kid dropped a big boulder into some Play-Doh, and that makes these little divots. These are still prominent on the landscape in our area, and there will just be this kind of impression, just like this shape of my hand, a literal divot in the ground. But because these were ginormous boulders, some of these divots are like 50 to 100 feet across, if not bigger. And a lot of farmers, I think some of the more responsible early occupants of the land in terms of European farming, clear the land types. Some of the more responsible early ones recognized that it wasn't practical to farm those, and so they never tore the trees out and took a plow through there. So we have some of those kettles that are still covered, and those are really nice wildlife refuges. They're beautiful. I won't talk about the pests that come out of the kettle, but we have observed that. So you could see that in the background here. We'll just, we'll keep moving here. I did not do this. Some of my predecessors at Michael Fields established, with the help of a prairie establishment company, I think about 30 acres of prairie strips that go all the way around the farm and around the kettles. So these are kind of around the outside of some pretty jaggedy polygons that form our farm. There's not a huge, beautiful diversity at this time of year, but normally we have a lot of forbs in here. You see the big blue stem becomes really dominant. That's these right here around this time of year. It's also called turkey foot. So you can remember big blue stem because it has this, there's like 4 of them, kind of panicle top. And then of course the goldenrod's coming on. So that forms our prairie strips. Those kind of also protect, they catch water and soil from leaving our farm, and they also prevent other things from washing into our farm, right? So I do like the approach that was originally devised for these, and that they go around the outside. And then, like I said, we have a tenant farmer, but we're collaborating extensively with him to help him with his ambition of putting in a food forest installation, as Katie called it. So this was started last year, and we've had kind of minimal dollars and effort go into this, but we're getting started in dribs and drabs, like so much of what happens on our land when we're busy people. So we've got one really nice row here of established aronia. The aronia seem pretty easy to establish, or at least they took really well on our side. He's got some willow over here. We've got just a couple elderberry trees that he put in that did well. He's got some perennial herbs interplanted around here. He mulched these rows with straw and wood chips. What we are going into in this field is this is an old alfalfa field that we initially did some disc type tillage in to initially work it and try to disrupt the alfalfa, but disking certainly won't kill alfalfa. We still have a lot of it here. What we did this year, and this was super weedy a couple weeks ago because nobody had had time to work on this, but what we did is we came in with a sickle bar mower, a BCS, cut the stuff down, and then we took a rototiller on a tractor through here to clear these rows. Now we do have some bare soil exposed here, but we're gonna seed a diverse cover crop mix, or actually it's already been seeded and it's just waiting on a good rain to get her going. So that's kind of how we're approaching this site. There's a lot more to come, but we're just experimenting as kind of inexperienced practitioners do, and it's looking better than it has. So we'll keep moving. There's just another shot of that. We do have this fenced with 10-foot fence to keep the deer out. This is another nice shot of the farm. You can see around here is alfalfa, which is a perennial. Alfalfa can be a part of perennial systems, certainly. Katie showed the system with the hay in it. And then we do have about 150 acres. Well, 130 of our acres are in cropland that we rent to our partner farmer, and he is organic, but he is growing the typical row cash crops: corn, soybean, rye, buckwheat. So this will give you an idea. We've got, a kind of irregular field. Agroforestry, surrounded by some alfalfa that we're converting out of alfalfa slowly. We got prairie strips on the outside. Then in Wisconsin, we have these beautiful hedgerows still in place. Here's one of those kettles, and then farmed cropland. So we really have a big meeting of the minds here. Another thing that's going on out here is we have this waterway let's see. So this is kind of a cistern, I guess you would call it. And then this is a waterway. We are at the toe of a slope that goes this way. Future pictures that I should have in here will show you this. In about 8 years ago, our executive director at Michael Fields observed a lot of soil washing down this because this is a big drainage area for this slope that I said that this west-facing slope. And that really troubled him for an institute that's supposed to be good stewards of the land. We're a sustainable ag institute. So he wanted to do something about it. We put in a perennial grassway here. So these are just perennial grasses that get mowed periodically. And then flanking this waterway are prairie strips, which have more diversity than what we have in the riparian waterway area. And then again on the outside, so this whole span from edge of the prairie strip over the waterway to the edge of the prairie strip spans about 100 feet. Now, we do get gripes from our farmer for having this in here, taking a lot of cropland out of production, and yet we still feel like it's the right thing to do. On the other hand, there is some good like staging area for equipment in these perennial areas. So while our perennials may get driven on a little bit earlier than they should be in the fall, it kind of works out for everybody and they seem to be surviving just fine. The reason that this is important is this actually empties way back here beyond the silo back here into a creek, don't quote me on which one, that goes into the Mukwonago River. The Mukwonago River is the second cleanest watershed remaining in our state. So there's a lot of actors around here who want to keep it that way. And that's also part of the story here of what's going on. Moving on. All right, so this is a shot where you can see more of that slope. And right here are my 15 acres of kernza. Kernza is a perennial grain, and I'll go on to share more about this later. We situated kernza on the slope rather than those row crops so that we're not doing tillage. Kernza is a perennial grain, gets planted in the fall. And now this is my 5th year that I've kept it in. And so it is giving us a marketable product, but it's also, and it's creating a perennial kind of protection zone for the soil on the slope so that we're not washing any off here. We're not washing any onto the road, which is right here. And we're also making a crop we can sell, unlike if you converted this to prairie. This is further upslope across the road. I established this whole field at the request of the landowner in Kernza last fall. So now what we have is almost this entire slope feeding into that waterway that is protected by perennial grasses and also trees and diverse prairie. So this is an example of how multiple minds kind of came together to make sure that we're doing what we can to protect the water quality of delivery into an important river in our area. So moving on to Kernza, this is a shot of a mature stand of Kernza. What does it look like? It looks like a prairie. It looks way more like a prairie than a crop field, than a grain field. And that's because it is actually a lot closer to a prairie. Kernza was developed from a grass called intermediate wheatgrass. Kernza is a grass called intermediate wheatgrass. No, it's not a native to North America, but it was introduced several centuries ago out west to improve the forage quality in our western rangelands, which it has. It's very good at protecting soil. It's very winter hardy, and it was recognized for its ability to provide forage and protect soil as well. So it's been a really important species on our continent for quite a while, but it also emerged as a domestication candidate, which means that when looking at a bunch of perennial grasses, intermediate wheatgrass was recognized as having grain that had strong edible properties and also grass that could be purposefully cultivated. So when they go in and we select high yielding individuals of intermediate wheatgrass, and when we grow those together to produce grain for food for human consumption, then we call that grain kernza. I don't want to get into why it was trademarked here. I get a lot of questions about that. The main reasons are because intermediate wheatgrass is not a very good way to market a food. And also, they are, as we make selection for higher yields in these populations, they are starting to genetically diverge from forage types of intermediate wheatgrass. So that's kind of why there's this different name with a little R trademark on it. And all of that breeding is taking place at the Land Institute, and it's all non-GMO. No genetic engineering techniques are used with kernza. So I mentioned a little earlier, this is established early in the fall. It looks quite puny. This is a picture of a field that I established a few years ago. These little seedlings, really quite wispy and wimpy. Here we go. Here are some. Maybe you can't quite see every row because they're so wimpy. Oh, we've got a few really robust looking individuals. That's volunteer oat. That's not the kernza. So establishment is probably one of the hardest production parts of kernza. We do see 25 to 30% of establishments fail. And we now know that that's pretty much because they're established with insufficient fall moisture. So what we've learned is to make sure that people know that they need to be seeding this before a good rain. And if that's the case, and if you don't plant it too deep, then we usually have pretty good luck with kernza establishment. It looks like it makes this really big, huge spike. Breeders are trying to shorten this a little bit, but it's quite green, makes these really long spikes. It looks a lot like ryegrass actually, but it's not. It grows during the summer, grows, it grows. And then at the end of August, we come and we harvest this. And actually what we have here is we set this down in swaths because this becomes a 6-foot tall plant. That's a lot of straw for a combine to handle. So how this is typically done is it's swathed, which means it's cut and mowed towards the base of the plant. Those plants are laid in these big long piles called windrows. And then those are left to sit and dry out for a few days. And then we come with a normal standard grain combine with pickup header here. That's what this thing is. And then we're able to pick up those swaths. And then we are able to get our harvested grain. No, it does not look like this in the combine. It looks a lot dirtier than this. And maybe I should have shown what that looks like. But after we've taken it in the combine, put in a gravity wagon, put air on it, dried it, and then it goes through the cleaning cycle, which is just passing over a series of sieves and air. I need to unplug my pancakes cooking. You're gonna travel with me. This is what the clean grain looks like. And this is what then we simply grind those grains and then it turns into this flour. And so we're able to have what is functionally a prairie establishment or a prairie ground cover, but now we have turned that system into an edible product, flour. And so we're still discovering, how to market this. And a big challenge of kernza world is that I refer to this as a novel food, which means that it's completely new to a lot of people. We have to figure out how to use it in our food systems. We have to use it. We have to understand all the things about marketing and whatnot. But it's really important. Now we're at that really crucial juncture where we need to grow the market so that more farmers are making money off this so it can scale, because the environmental benefits of this system are really well documented. So it can be made into all sorts of things, including waffles and pancakes and cookies and bread. And it's really just the beginning. But I really think that I should have ended with a nice inspiring picture. But I think that what inspires me are these shots that, sorry. Yeah, I think I want to end on this one because we've got this beautiful protected slope. And if this were a wheat field, this would be turned black right now. So I'm interested in exploring how, and so is Katie, and so is the Savannah Institute, how we can bridge the divide between conservationists and farmers, and how we can still produce food off of lands while keeping them protected the best way we know how, which is to have perennial cover. So I'll end it there.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Nicole is the Kunza expert in the state, and if anybody has more questions, please feel free to reach her at nicole.ntouches@michaelfields.org. And if you have any more production questions about small grains as well, she will be happy to answer you. So anytime, feel free to connect to her later after this webinar. I will now move things over to Christine, who's my colleague and teammate in WeWick, in order to process the questions that came our way and to handle this part of the Q&A session. Christine, please.
Yay. Well, you all were paying great attention because we didn't get questions flooding the chat. So you were being thoughtful listeners to our guests. So I would invite anyone to maybe come off mute or camera and ask our presenters yourself if anything came up for you during these two discussions.
Regarding Kunza, how long, perennials, in a farming system, hay, alfalfa is very much a perennial that we're very familiar with, but we do tend to rotate that. What's that crop rotation even in a perennial system with Kernza look like?
Yep, good question. We do see stand yield declines with Kernza, not too similar, or not too dissimilar from alfalfa. We're seeing a lot of variability in terms of when that stand decline happens, because what happens is that the field will it'll stay really grassy. The biomass production stays high, but we get a lower number of reproductive tillers. So you'll just see kind of a grass field without those nice spikes. I really feel that it's related to fertility management, though we don't fully understand the physiological drivers. And even being a Kernza production person, I feel like I need to make some money off of this before I'm importing a bunch of fertilizer and having outflow of dollars. So there's like economic and knowledge constraints still there. But so one of my fields is kind of petering out, and it's after 4 years, and yet the picture of what we just harvested that I show you, I thought it was still going strong after 5. So it really depends on the site. We have done some poultry manure fertilization there. People do different things. So you can take it out and go back to corn and soy. We're going to study what the soil health and how the soil health indicators that you've built up over those years of Kernza, how those are changing. But I've done some work with alfalfa systems being taken out, and we found that actually a lot of soil health indicators going up are still preserved after even a year or two after coming out of alfalfa. So there is that. Some people turn it into a hay or a graze system. If you have livestock, you can keep it in and then just turn it into a pasture. And then we're also thinking there may be some strategies to use there that kind of rejuvenate the stand productivity, but it's really research. So we need probably another good 5 years to figure that out.
Thanks, Nicole. Hopefully that answered your question, Leah. There's a question in the chat, and then Erin, I see your hand, so you'll be after this question with your next one. Katie, Alana asked how to get started with the canopy tool.
Yeah, we're really excited about this canopy compass tool because it was cultivated from research that was happening within Savannah Institute, and our oh my gosh, Monica Shea, who's our landscape ecologist, had really done a lot of work on working with both producers and researchers across the United States to ground truth and check crop suitability for like 20 different crops that we often work with in agroforestry systems, as well as her forestry background and bringing that to some native trees as well. Right now, it exists as a tool on the Canopy website and with our partners, Canopy Farm Management, which is a sister company of Savannah Institute. And what you'll go to the website, you'll put in your location, you'll outline your field similar to Web Soil Survey if you're familiar with that tool. And then it generates a 80-page report with a ton of information about your landscape, a ton of information on the crops that are suitable, and it gives you a suitable range from not ideal to ideally suited. And so you can see kind of the spectrum of, well, maybe it's not super ideal, like say something like chestnuts aren't super ideal for this reason. Maybe it's pH, or maybe it's soil drainage. And you might say, well, it's like slightly suited, and I'm just going to try it anyway with a couple trees to see what happens. So you can really play around with that spectrum of not suitable to highly suitable and make decisions on what you might want to do on your farm. All of the information that Canopy Compass is pulling from in terms of like site suitability, in terms of soil and water and pH and all those things, come from publicly available data sets. So the same thing I said about Web Soil Survey, like you want to ground truth what's coming out of the report, but it can be a good kind of starting place to see what crops might be well. Oftentimes folks say, I want to grow apples on my farm, but if you put that into the Canopy Compass, it might pop out that your land isn't suitable. And so that can be some hard kind of conversations around like, well, I really want to grow apples, but the land I have access to isn't good for apples. So maybe there's another crop that could do well.
Thank you, Katie. Erin, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. This question is for Nicole. I heard you say something about marketing, and I can only imagine how that would go, especially with a newer introduced crop. That also has a lot of benefits, especially based off of what you said. I thought those photos look so beautiful of the progress being made. Sure, it's challenging, but thank you for sharing that. And I was just curious how the marketing goes for that, and just how outreach goes for that. And really, if y'all are looking to expand your team, and just if you like going to conferences and sort of like conventions to make that happen, and having booths. Yeah, really just here to support that mission, and just hear a little bit more, because this is definitely news to me. I didn't even really think about how that could really change the trajectory of yeah, introducing and selling something as simple as that. So but congratulations also on the discovery. That's really exciting.
Thanks. Well, it wasn't, yeah, this has been decades of work by plant breeders to get us to this point, where our perennial grass is yielding 500 pounds per acre, which is still really low. So there's a long way to go. Now they're using more data in terms of how they make selections. So they're actually, the top breeder at the Land Institute is expecting yield parity with wheat. And just, sorry, we had an unexpected child come home. We are expecting yields to go up to wheat levels in like 20 years, which is really fast. So this has been a lot of plant breeding effort. And then I also think that it's a big farmer effort, and then yeah, it's a big marketing effort. So I think it's been really hard to introduce a novel food, especially a grain, to large food companies. So at some point I started to see the futility of that conversation and just started making my own products and direct marketing them to consumers. And when you have that conversation and doing face-to-face education, it's slow, but it really works. And it's building kind of a critical level of enthusiasm among a consumer base. What helps with Kernza is that it tastes good, and it really, any new sustainable food has to start with that. It just has to taste good. You're not going to be able to market something that's not good. Katie's vigorously nodding. Yeah, so and some of the, yeah, they're dealing with this in the agroforestry realm too. I know I don't need to talk too much about that, but some of the things I think, like, at least people already know what hazelnuts are, so that helps because people already know what they are. But for things that are different, like aronia or pawpaw or even honeyberry, which are so delicious, by the way, honeyberries are better than blueberries, and blueberries are a pain in the butt to grow, and honeyberries I think are like native, so why are we doing this? Honeyberries are delicious. So there's a lot of challenge. It's gonna take a long time. We're all have to do it. I think we all should just be doing it in our own communities. And the argument that we get is like, but it's not gonna scale when you do that. I don't know. So we kind of pick, there are different people that employ different strategies, and hopefully we all move the needle forward. But the market aspect, honestly, is the largest constraint to the land conversion.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Wonderful. Well, folks, we're at time, so just want to be thoughtful of you being here, but also what's happening for the rest of the day. I'll pass it back to Esther for maybe some continued Q&A, but if you have to scoot, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Katie and Nicole. Holy cow.
Thank you, Christine. So Christine, as she leaves, I want to just remind you all that more events are there on our website if you want to go ahead and register for some of those events that's coming up. I also wanted to talk about a series of webinars that's coming up in November about the Native American Heritage Month. I would request all of you to come and join us for those series of webinars as well. And don't forget our donate button. That's one of the things that I would really request you all to consider as you make these donations towards the end of the year, and make sure that you will help us with the match that's coming up as well. So those are my requests for today. I want to be mindful of people who joined in and want to drop off at 1 p.m. If you do want to drop off, please feel free to drop off at this point, but the resource people